Hi everyone, this is Mariel Thompson from the Margolis Market Lab, and today I'm going to be presenting our Tableau crash course, which is an introduction to Tableau software and an overview of some of the use cases. Here's a quick agenda. Okay, let's start with our first section. What is Tableau? Tableau is a business intelligence software that produces data visualization and uses an intuitive drag and drop interface for data visualization without program. Essentially, all that means is that Tableau is a great software that you can use to model your data, and you don't have to do any of the difficult programming that you might have to do with another language like Python or R. Some of the capabilities of Tableau are that you can connect to a wide variety of data sources such as Excel spreadsheets, databases, cloud services, and more. You can keep your data constantly up to date, and you can visualize and create interactive dashboards. Ultimately, you can use Tableau to make your numbers come to life. Oftentimes, when you have a big data set, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers. So, this is a great software that you can use to create compelling models to really demonstrate what you're trying to say with your data. Okay, before we get into learning how to use Tableau, let's discuss some resources that you have available to you as a student. Tableau offers Tableau for Students, which is a 1-year license that's offered to students at accredited universities. This license gives you access to Tableau software that you can download on up to 2 devices, as well as a student resource page. So remember, if you end up using your Tableau for Students license, you can only have the software on 2 devices. So if you wanted to have it on your personal computer, like I do, or and a desktop, that would be the only way you'd be able to use Tableau. We also have Tableau software downloaded on the computers in the Margolis Market Lab if you'd like to use those as well. So let's see how you can get access to your Tableau for Students free 1-year license. To access this software, you will simply type in Tableau for Students into your browser and click on the first link, which should bring you to this page. And you'll just hit Get Tableau for free, and then you can enter all of your basic information to prove that you, in fact, are a student at an accredited university. And the Tableau team will send you an activation key and download instructions to help get this software onto your personal computer. Okay, now let's discuss some of the ways that you can use Tableau. I'm just going to show you a few graphs from the Tableau team that discuss how, or that demonstrate how you can use Tableau to create really compelling data, either with um, cloud-based data or data that you have personally on your computer. So right here I have S&P economic indicators, and I just broke down some of the ways that you might want to use Tableau, which might be finance, retail, geographical crime, online advertising, and I could keep going on, but here are some of the graphs just so you can get an idea of what the software is capable of. Okay, so now that you've seen all of those examples, I just wanted to mention that today we will be using a finance-focused example, and you'll see our data a little bit later, but let's get into using Tableau. So when you open Tableau on your computer, you'll simply double click the Tableau icon on your desktop or whatever um, s- uh, device that you're using, and you in the lab will have this on our computers, and you can just use your navigator in the left corner of your screen to search for the app or for the software and just click on it and open it like any other app. Okay, once you are in Tableau, you should focus on this pane that I've shown right here. So the first thing that you need to do when you're in Tableau is figure out what data source that you want to connect to. In many ways, Tableau behaves very similarly to Excel. You can create worksheets and you can also connect worksheets to one another and base certain data off of one another. But in Tableau, they make it very easy for you with this connect pane, and you can just see all the files that you might be able to connect to. So, like I said, you can use Microsoft Excel, a text file, a JSON file, PDF, and so much more. Today, we're going to be using an Excel file, and I'm not sure if this is the still correct name for the file that we'll be using, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But you want to just start by clicking the file that we were going to use today, which is Microsoft Excel, and we'll navigate to the next page. So once you've actually connected to your data, this is the pane that you'll see. So let's first go ahead and jump into my Tableau software so I can show you what this looks like. All right, here is the main page of Tableau. As you can see here, I can open any workbook that I have available. And for the sake of this class, I cleared out all of my workbooks and we are just going to start completely fresh. So I'm going to start by connecting to a Microsoft Excel file. Okay, so here is the data set that we were using, and it is entitled Tableau Crash Course Dataset. You can ignore this one. This is just because I had multiple copies on my computer. And simply open this. Okay, as soon as you have the data open, we are immediately navigated to this page right here, which is what I showed in my presentation. So um, this connections pane is really great because you can always see which data you're connected to. And if you want to get a little bit more advanced, you can add multiple data sources, but this is great so you can keep an eye on what data source you're connected to. Okay, and the other great thing about Tableau is that it gives you an overview of what the actual data source you're using is. So here the setup is very similar to an Excel file. And just to give you a quick overview of the data that we're using today, this is beverage sales based on different markets, product types in different states, area codes, and so much other data. But I would definitely classify this as a financial sheet just because we have a lot of financial a lot of financial calculations such as cost of goods sold, budget margin, budget profit. And you don't need to understand what these things mean for the sake of this crash course, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. And then down here, this is another way that Tableau resembles Excel. You have all of your worksheets, and you can simply click the new worksheet button to add another worksheet, and you will compile worksheets within your Tableau window. So, and if you want to ever navigate back to the data source page, simply click data source. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. So like I said, you will see whatever connections you're connected to in this left pane over here, and you can open a new worksheet in this bottom pane, and right here is just a summary of your data. Okay, so now this is a more intricate part of Tableau. This is where we understand the difference between dimensions and measures. So as you saw in our last page, there are lots of different columns and rows within our data set. And essentially, when you import your data into Tableau, it automatically separates it into two categories, which can be described as dimensions and measures. So, dimensions are fields that cannot be aggregated or measured as values, and generally they're used as column or row headings within the visualization that I showed you before. And some examples of this are product, product type, state, all those kind of things. And you can also see with these little icons right next to them, none of these are actual numerical values. So even area code, Tableau is able to recognize this as a geographical data type. So you have this little globe icon. It recognizes dates, strings, um, and Also, here's another geographical one. So, okay, and then next, measures are fields that can be aggregated, measured, or used for mathematical operations. So that would be our budgeted cost of goods sold, budget margin, budget profit, inventory, basically all just numbers. Another thing I do want to mention is that for our data set measures also include latitude and longitude. The longitude got a little bit cut off, but um, Tableau is actually able to generate latitude and longitude of our dimensions that we had here. So these don't actually come within our data set. Tableau just automatically generates this, which is such a great feature, which you'll learn later on, because this is great for visualizing maps and anything that has to do with geography. All right, so let's navigate back to our Tableau window. Okay, so when you open your first sheet, this is what you'll see. Like I said, we have the dimensions, we have the measures, and here's another important thing, which is the marks card. The marks card is basically just how you can mark your data or how you want it to appear in your visualization. So we'll get into this a little bit later. But the next most important thing is the Show Me tab. So essentially, what the Show Me tab is good for is understanding what dimensions and measures are necessary for each type of visualization that you want to make. Now, of course, there are several different kinds of visualizations that you can make in Tableau, but here are a set of ones that are common and they give you essentially a formula of how to create each visualization. So, for example, if you want to create a pie chart, Tableau says that you require one or more dimensions and one or two measures. So, this just gives you an idea of what you need. And as I said before, Tableau is completely drag and drop based, so you don't have to do anything crazy as far as coding what each dimension is into the columns or rows. All you do is click on whatever you need and drop it into each one. So as you become more experienced with the software, you'll understand where each thing goes based on columns or rows. But the main thing to really understand is that you need to understand the difference between what dimensions are and measures are. Okay, so like I said, the marks card provides control over how the data is displayed without affecting the headers that are built by the fields and rows or in columns. So you can change mark properties with different options depending on your selected mark type. Right here, we just have color, size, text, detail, and tooltip. And these are properties that are always available, but you can also see shape, angle, or path. And as you can see here, I did a quick visualization of all the sales in each state. So let's just try to demonstrate this very quickly. So first thing I want to do is just drag my state dimension into my rows. But as you can see, my second column right here is not populated with anything. That's because this is all I've given Tableau to work with, just the rows. So if I want to start populating this um, just basic chart with data, I'll need to drag my sales measure onto the marks card, but I'm dragging it specifically onto the text mark. This is what's going to allow the data to populate. Now, if I were to try that again and simply just drop sales on the marks card, Tableau doesn't know what to do with this. All it knows is that it's just a measure that I'm using. So it's important that you drag it onto whichever mark you feel represents your data most. And the great thing about this is that you can adjust, as you can see automatically, it calculates the sum of sales for each state, but I actually want to, if I want to change the measure to represent average or median, I can do all of that. All you need to do is click on the measure that you're using. Also, dimensions can go in here in the marks card as well, but I'm just using measure right now. You'll just need to click on the dimension or measure, and you should get a drop-down menu, which you can manipulate through this menu. So let's just go back to what we were doing. Sum of sales, and I will use this little box up here to label my worksheet just so I have an idea of what this data is if I come back several sheets later and want to understand what I was doing with this chart here. Here it is. Okay, one other great thing about Tableau and another way that it behaves very similarly to Excel is that you can use crosstabs to manipulate your data and really focus on one specific row and one specific column if necessary or more, but just really hone your data and figure out what exactly you want to look at. So to exemplify this, I use the product type dimension and the state dimension in columns and rows respectively. And then I dragged the sum of profit onto the text mark to populate my little box chart here. And all you really have to do to create a crosstab is just highlight the rows or columns that you want to use, and you will just use shift click on your key and shift on your keyboard and then click on whatever rows and columns that you want to use to keep them highlighted together. So let's demonstrate this very quickly. Um, let's delete this little sum of sales and change it out to profit. And I'm dragging product type to columns. Now, quickly before I show you how to do the crosstab, I just wanted to mention that a lot of people get confused that you have to use either one measure in the columns and one dimension in rows or vice versa. That's not true. You can use both of each type in another. It's not very restrictive. As you get to be better with Tableau, you'll just play around and figure out which configuration helps to portray the data that you're trying to extract. So, okay, back to the crosstabs. I'm going to click on my espresso column, excuse me, and shift click on New Mexico. I'm not sure if this was the um, example that I was using on my presentation, but as you can see, I have a drop-down menu here, which can descend the columns, and I can also click on the column that I'd like to use and keep only that. And now you can see I have espresso profit by state. And if I want to do the same, I can do that. But yeah, that's basically how you do crosstabs. Just shift and click on whatever you want to do. Nothing too crazy. Alrighty. Let's talk about the analytics pane next. So far in this farthest left pane in our Tableau window, we've been working with the data pane, which gives us all of our dimensions and measures, but there's also another tab which is called analytics, and that gives us a lot of different ways to summarize, model, and customize our data. So you can add another layer to your data, such as the total or subtotal, just by navigating to the analytics pane and utilizing this total summary. So let's do that. I'm just hitting Command Z on my keyboard to navigate back. And now that I have my full row, I'm just hitting this analytics pane over here on the far left and hitting the totals. Um, You can do either column totals, row totals, whatever you want. I just dragged this over. I believe you can click it as well, but I think I had to be like actually on my graph, but doesn't matter. All I did was just drag this over, and now I have grand totals for both states and product types. And this is super nifty because it's just a great way to total all of your data, or you can find averages, whatever. But this is a great way to do it because now I don't have to enter any formulas or anything. Tableau just automatically does it for me. Okay, so believe it or not, you have learned all of the basics of how to navigate the Tableau software. So now we're going to start doing some visualizations. Okay, so the setup for this is typically when I'm in the classroom teaching this crash course, I will read the problem to students, which you have the first one right here, and I'll ask them to navigate into their own Tableau software and try to solve it on their own, just using what they know. You don't have to be an expert at Tableau just to give it a shot. You can play around for sure. I'll give them about 5 minutes to just work it out and explore, and then I will show my answer after. So for each example, I think I have 3 or 4. I'm just going to do the same thing. We'll go over the question, I'll give a couple hints, and then I'll give you time to navigate into the software on your own. So I'll run through the 5 minutes and then we'll come back and I'll show my answer to each one. So for our first question I have, for each state, what product type has the highest margins and the most sales? This one's pretty straightforward, so just go ahead and give it a try on your own. Okay, we are back. Hopefully you've had enough time to try this problem out for yourself. And if you didn't get it, don't worry. We're going to do a couple more examples and hopefully you'll get the hang of it before the end of this course. Okay, so just to review our question again, I asked for each state what product type has the highest margins and the most sales. Now, there's definitely not one answer to each of these questions, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how you might want to use the features of Tableau to demonstrate your data or model your data. So for this one, I used a geographic map. And I also used density data points to demonstrate um, more sales in one state rather than another. So for this problem, I simply dragged the latitude and longitude measures to rows and columns and rows, respectively. It looks like I did longitude and columns and rows, latitude, but it doesn't actually matter which one you do. Um, and then I used the product type and area code dimension on the marks card using the product type as a label. And then I just used the area code, margin, and sales as just regular details. So let's start working on this. So if you will navigate to our fresh sheet, if you weren't sure how to do a geography map, you can just hover over right here and it says that you need one geographical dimension, 0 or more dimensions, and then one or more measure. But just quickly, generally when you have something that's filtered by either state, city, area code, anything like that, it can be very helpful to whoever you're presenting your data to, just to demonstrate some kind of map so they can get a like very um, physical image of what they're looking at. So let's get back to our data. Like I said, I used latitude and longitude in my columns and rows. Whoops, there we go. And right now I have nothing. That's okay. we are going to also add the product type label, and I believe I did margin. And what else was it? I think sales. Let's just double check. Yep, margin sales. And then I also layered my data with area code. Now, this might not make sense and it's not super intuitive, so don't worry. But basically, the reason I added area code is that when I go to my map, my geographic map, oh, I have to delete this out of here. I don't know how that got there. If I did not have the area code one, I just have state or something like that. This is what I'm getting. And you can change it to get a density one, but basically with this, you can't actually really see what's going on unless you hover over. When I populate my graph with a lot more data, such as area code, because there are more area codes than there are states, I'm able just to get a lot more data points, and you can really see much easier um, where there are more sales, regardless of whether you hover over it or not. So now that we have our now that we have our map, let's start playing with a little bit of the color and density. So as you saw, I clicked on this density indicator right here, and you can already see wherever the indicator is super dark, that's where we have the highest amount of um, margin and sales. So just for an example, in New York, area code 347, we have 623 sale and 374 margin. And this goes for all of these, but you can actually start to play with the color. So it doesn't matter which color range you use, but I'm going to go ahead and use this um, density multicolor one. And you can adjust the intensity and the opacity. So when I adjust my intensity down, it's just that you can't really see where things change. So put it about at about mid-range. You don't want it all the way up here, and you don't want it all the way down here. So just use a slide bar to figure out what works best for you. Now that I have it at 65%, I can really see where I have the highest concentration, which is anything that's yellow. Okay, and that is pretty much it for this example. So let's go ahead and name the sheet. And right now I'm just doing this for the sake of remembering what is what, and we can move on to our next sheet. All right, next question. Which region of the United States sells the most coffee? Now, I know last time I mentioned that you want to use geographic maps when you're talking about anything like region, state, so on and so forth. But for this example, I'm going to go ahead and encourage you to use another chart that doesn't involve a map, just because we've already tried that. And this is an opportunity for you to try to use a new visualization type. Alrighty, hopefully you've had enough time to give this question a shot. Let's get into my suggested response. Okay, so for this visualization, I decided to use a heat map to demonstrate product type sales by state. So I'm using this heat map to essentially compare categorical data using color. So what I did for this one is I dragged my product type and state dimensions into columns and rows respectively. And I dragged the sum of my, well, not the sum, but my sales measure onto the Marks color card and just use the sum of margin as a detail. The margins not even relevant to this question. It's just another thing that you can add because I don't believe I mentioned that. But let's get started with doing this in Tableau. Okay, I believe I used product type and state, and then sales onto color. And I'm just going to leave the margin off because I don't think it really adds anything. Um, you can go ahead and adjust the color to whatever you want. I use red gold, so just to keep consistent. And now you can see just visually from this graph, whatever is darkest, it gives you a key over here, but red is the highest amount of sales, and at the top of the range, we have 34,299, and at the low end, we have 1,972. So just looking at this, I can see that California sells the most espresso with the top of our range. So California sells the most espresso. Surprise, surprise. Okay, I'm just going to name this. And let's move on to our next question. For each market region, how much of their profit goal has been achieved? All right, I'll give you a shot to complete this on your own. Okay, and we're back. So what you'll want to do is start by dragging market and measure names into your columns. These are dimensions, so let's start with just our columns and rows because this one is a little bit more complex. But basically, the way that I approach this is I want to ultimately compare the budgeted profit to the actual profit, which is just called profit. And the way that I'm segmenting this is by market. And we'll get into why I use measure names in both of these, in both rows and columns. So let's just start with market, budget, profit, and profit. Okay, so with this, I have nothing. I do want to drag this onto here as well as the measure because as you can see, I don't have any numbers right now. Everything is really just a string. Okay, so here we have a little bit of a problem. When you add measure values, it is a whole host of all of these other things. So I just want to focus on budget, profit, and profit. So I'm basically going to delete everything other than that. And to select all of these, all I'm doing is shift click, much like you would do in Excel, and just pressing the delete key. Okay, so now we don't actually have a need for these marks that I added here. And basically, we can look at our show me to actually identify how. And as you can see, I had all of the necessary information for this type of graph, but that was just the default. And just to select anything that is already highlighted, meaning that you have the necessary data for it, you can just click on it. And now we have our basic chart. I think in the other graph, I played around with the colors a little bit, but I think you get the picture, so we won't do that this time around. And I'll just name this. All right, And that is it. So just to wrap right back around to our question, um, I asked specifically how much of the profit goal was achieved, and I know my visualization did not give an exact value, but that is okay because what this visualization does do is just gives you a very, very plain and simple depiction of a whether or not the actual profit is above or below the budgeted profit. So, as you can see here, for everything, every market but the South attained their budgeted profit. So, this is a way, again, to make the numbers come to life. I could give you a number, but it's much nicer and honestly easy to see it in this bar graph format. Okay, so we are reaching our final section of this crash course, which is creating a story in Tableau. So this is really the best part about Tableau is that you can compile all of your worksheets from one data source or many data sources to convey an overall presentation. So let's just get started. Creating in Stories Tableau allows us to bring meaning to the data by telling a story in our presentation. So really, all that means is that we are compiling our worksheets that we've worked on to one large presentation. So just navigating to this bottom pane here, and like I could add a new worksheet, I can also add a new story. Okay, so now I have all of my worksheets here on this left pane, and basically you add a new story point by hitting this blank new story point button. You can add as many as you want. Um, but one thing that I forgot to mention was that when you name your sheets, this doesn't actually transfer to the sheet name down here. All we have is sheet 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not really helpful for us. So just very quickly, I want to show you that I'm just right clicking on the sheet tab that I want to use and then just rename it accordingly. And you can do that for all of your sheets. Um, for the sake of my presentation, it's not necessary, but just wanted to show you that. Okay, so to actually populate our new story point, I'm just going to drag whatever sheet I want to use right onto here. And Tableau puts it in this really nice format. It's great. And you do that to each story point that you want to use. And I'm just going to show you a few of the features that you can use within a story. You can add text to your story point. So right here, if I wanted to write a quick description, I can just summarize my data. You can expand this. This is just a great way either to have notes for you or just to give some people something to read. Much like you would do in a PowerPoint presentation, you might have your actual data and then words to describe what they're looking at. But yeah, everything is here. The whole chart, the axis names, and measure names, or sorry, not the measure names, but the key, so you know which one you're looking at. And what else can you do? You can show the title, which is basically when you have like the name of your story. So I'll edit it. And you can choose whether to show this or not. You can also edit the size. And yeah, you can do all of this. The other great thing is that these are interactive. So if you're presenting this, you can zoom in and out of your data. You can pin on your data or pin the worksheet. Um, yeah, so this is really great. And then if you'd like to present this very similar to a PowerPoint, all you have to hit is this little icon up here, which is presentation mode. And you've basically got a presentation with all the data that you've worked on. Now, Tableau has very many ways to share your worksheets or your stories. There's an online database where you can share them, and you can also just download them as Tableau files or even PowerPoint files. If you want to learn more about that, I would just say navigate to the Tableau for Students resource page, and there will be complete instructions about it. Okay, so we went over this, but I'll just recap. So you drag whatever sheet you want into the new blank story point, and if you want to add a new story point, hit the new blank point and repeat the process. All right, wrapping up. Here are some resources. So I mentioned that you can navigate to the Tableau for Students resource page to discuss or to learn about how you can use Tableau in more advanced ways. So there are infinite functions and methods for data visualization in Tableau, but great thing about the software is that it is so well documented, not only by the community of users, but also just the people who own and created the software. So there's not really anything that you can't find out the answer to. And you can use the Tableau knowledge base for any questions as well as the community forum. Okay, so that is all for this crash course today. I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. If you would like to reach out with questions, you can always shoot me an email at marielt2@illinois.edu, and I'll be sure to get back to you as quickly as possible. But that is all for our crash course today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great day. Bye.